Hey, what's up everyone? This is Music Tech Help Guy, and in this video, I'm going to show you 3 really simple but hidden features of the chord track in Logic Pro 11 that will exponentially speed up your workflow when it comes to building chord progressions and fleshing out a harmonic framework for your song. So I'll admit these features are really not that hidden. It's more like I just forgot to include them in my chord track tutorial earlier this week, so I wanted to make sure that I hit on these. So 2 of the features are the ability to quickly create chord progressions by just typing in the chords and then tabbing over to the next bar, so no key commands, no mouse clicks needed. And the second is the ability to drag and drop your chord progressions down to any track. I got a whole bunch of comments on that last video with folks upset that the chord track didn't have these features, but it does have these features. This was just an oversight on my part. There's also one more feature that's more of a session player trick to use session player regions on any instrument, and I'll show you that one at the end. Before I get into the tutorial though, I want to quickly tell you about the sponsor of today's video and the reason why I can still pay my bills, Boombox. Are you ready to take your music collaboration to the next level? Say goodbye to endless email chains and Dropbox links and say hello to Boombox, the ultimate file storage and collaboration platform designed by music makers for music makers. With Boombox, you get secure file storage for all of your multi-track stems, mix bounces, and even full DAW sessions. Invite collaborators to your projects where they can leave time-stamped comments and voice notes, making collaboration seamless for your bandmates, clients, and co-producers. Plus, with the mobile app and desktop sync app, you can work on your music from anywhere. But here's the best part. Boombox includes the vast majority of features even with their free plan. And when you sign up today, you'll get 4 GB of free storage. So why wait? Join Boombox today and experience seamless collaboration for yourself. Okay, so prior to the chord track, my method of building out chords was to just type out in piano roll or in the step sequencer or play in with MIDI the 7 diatonic chords in the key that I'm working in. So here I'm in A minor, so there's no sharps, no flats. You can see I have all 7 of my diatonic triads. What I would typically do is I would then cut these up. I would label these maybe 1 through 7, and then I could say, okay, I've got my 1, 4, 3, 5 progression. And you could sort of shuffle these around and come up with a harmonic framework for your song. The chord track kind of throws all of this out the window because it will generate the MIDI for you. You can actually, drag and drop your progressions down to any MIDI track. It's not just the session players. But before we do that, we got to come up with a chord progression. So the first thing I'd recommend doing is setting your key. Even if you're not sure what the final key of the song is going to be, at least decide on major or minor. I like to work in A minor because it's the easiest, but you can always very easily transpose this to another key later if you need to. So with the chord track, you hit G to bring up your global tracks, and then make sure the chord track's here. If you don't see it, you can right click or control click and show it. Click the plus button here to create your first chord. And instead of clicking all of this stuff in here, you can actually type in the chords. If you know the chord progression already, like I want A minor 7. If you hit return, it will then confirm that chord. But check this out. If you hit tab, it'll just tab over to the next bar line and you can enter in a new chord. So maybe I want to do F major 7, tab. Let's do E minor 7, tab. And then let's go G, add 9. Tab over. Maybe I want to do another A minor 7. Let's do an A minor, like an add 9 sort of thing. In fact, we'll just do A minor, add 9. Let's see what that does. There we go. Then we'll do F major 7 again. We can do E minor 7 again. And then to finish up, let's do a G6 on this last one. Now, if you want to go back, you can actually press Shift and Tab, and you can jump back to a previous chord, and you can change that. So that's another cool feature. So once you've got your chord progression in here, what you can then do, you can just drag and drop this down to any MIDI-based track. So any software instrument, whether it's a Logic instrument, a session player, or if it's a third-party instrument, like I'm using Ignition keys here from Contact. And so what this really does is it just creates block chords for each triad or 7th chord or whatever it is, and then puts a bass 1 octave lower than the chord. And so this will give you a quick way to build a song framework, generate chord progressions while you're still generating them. It's not something Logic's creating for you. And then if you want to come in here and apply your own smooth voice leading, you can do that. We can just drop some of these down an octave. And now we've got our smooth voice leading. Maybe I want to drop some of these basses down an octave. We can do stuff like that as well. We can respell these chords in any way we like. Maybe I'll pull that up there. Actually, let's do this one. Pull that up there. One weird note in this chord, but the point is I was able to do that without having to click in notes or without even having to use a MIDI controller. I'm able to create chord progressions with my mind, and then Logic just assists me in entering the MIDI, which I think is incredibly cool. What you'll also see is that at the bottom of the MIDI region, it sort of ties the chord progression to the MIDI region. If you have a MIDI region that has this on it, like let's say I copy this over here, or maybe to another section of the song, you can actually drag and drop that up into the chord track, and it will fill the chord progression from the selected region. So there's one tricky thing here. If you have chords, but there isn't already like a chord analysis here, for example, I can go to chords and I could say delete region chords. If you don't have region chords in the region, when you drag this up, it's not going to work. So unfortunately, we're not quite there yet. It would be really cool if you could just, punch in your own chords and then drag it up to the chord track and it automatically learns it. But the chord track has to generate the chords first and then place them on the region. And now let's say at some point here we want to do like a key change. Let's change up our last chord here from a G6 to a G7. It's like a dominant seventh. And I repeat this region, drag and drop the chord progression up there. But let's say at bar 9, I want to go to a different key. Let's say I want to go to C minor. I can add in a new signature, create a new key signature change, select C minor. And what it'll do is it'll take that chord progression we had over here and it'll transpose it up to the correct key. Now, one last thing I want to show you is that you can add session player regions to any track, not just session player tracks. So, for example, if I delete this region here, and at bar 9, I want to add in a session player region, you can do that. You just right click or control click, select create session player region. So the session player regions are not necessarily tied to the track. What you're going to do, in some cases, if this is the first time you're doing it, you're probably going to get a drummer region on your keyboard track, and that's totally fine. We can fix that. You double click, opens up the session player editor, come down here and change the type from drummer down to whatever instrument you're placing this on. The trick here is you have to turn off this change patch option, because if you have this on and then I go and select a keyboard player, like a bass player, for example, it's going to change the instrument on that track. It's going to automatically switch it over to the session bass player, the session keyboard player, or whatever you're using. So when you initially put the session player region on a MIDI track and double click and open it up, make sure if you're switching the type from one to any of these other ones, turn off the option change patch. And what this will do is it will make sure to preserve the instrument that you've selected on that track. So now I'm using the keyboard player region, session player region with Contact. So I'm using a chord progression that I created with an instrument of my choice, but using the keyboard player, session player region as a way to sort of generate this arpeggiated part, which kind of brings me to my very last topic for this video. If you'll allow me to get on my soapbox for a moment, I wasn't really surprised at how much hate there was in the comments for the new session players. Anytime you introduce a feature that is, quote, AI and it automatically generates music, you're going to get some pushback. I get it. It's a little scary, but I think a lot of people are just looking at this the wrong way. They're looking at it in the worst possible way it could be used. In my opinion, new tools like this that make composing music easier and faster do not necessarily result in bad, stale, cookie cutter music. People are responsible for making bad, stale, cookie cutter music, not tools. And they do that by not developing their own musical ideas. And I'm likely not going to be using all session players for my song. I'm going to have a mixture of my own ideas and then some generated stuff. It's still my song. If you're the kind of person who thinks, oh, people with no talent are going to be making songs now, let me push back on that a little bit. I would argue that people with very little traditional musical training have been making music for decades now. And I don't think it's anything too crazy to say. People have been using loops and samples to make music for decades, and it has created entire genres of music. Using generative players like this is really no different than loops. I look at drummer and the keyboard and bass player as just MIDI loop generators. That's really what they are. It's just another way to compose with loops. Plenty of people have used loops to assist in composition that resulted in great music. I use loops all the time. Do I only use loops? No. Do I use a loop here or there and then build my own idea around it? Absolutely. And that's the point I think a lot of people are missing here. And this isn't just coming from some dude on YouTube with a music production channel. I went to school for music. I was a performing live and session musician for 20 years. I still do it. You know, I've probably played guitar or piano or drums or vocals on 200 songs now. You know, I've contributed as a session player myself to many, many recordings. You know, I have a master's degree in music composition. So trust me, I know my theory. I know the value of understanding the fundamentals of music. I've taught college level music theory courses for music students and audio students. And I've even developed multiple theory courses on my own for college programs. So this idea that like AI assisted or generative music is somehow going to be the downfall of modern music and the music industry, that's not falling on deaf ears. But the idea that a tool just instantly makes the music worse, I wholeheartedly disagree with that. So, you know, just like if I were to create an entire song from nothing but loops and I didn't put my own swing on it and didn't contribute any of my own original ideas, that's, you know, it's probably not going to be that imaginative of a song. Just like if I rely on ChatGPT to write my lyrics, you're probably not going to end up with something that's that great. The same goes for the generative players in Logic 11. If you only use session regions, you're basically just using all loops. But if you're using a part or two and then build your own arrangement around it, or use it as a starting point and then alter it to fit your own song idea, I don't see why that's a problem. You know, one of the best things we can do with these session player regions is you can convert them to MIDI, and then you can come in here and you can change it up in any way you like. So I think people are looking at, you know, what the tool does immediately and not looking at, you know, the final product, the revisions that it has to go through to get to, you know, to it be integrated into a musical work. Even when drummer was the only session player, let's forget about the bass and keyboard player for a second. I probably mixed 100 songs or more where the artist used drummer as their main drum part, but then recorded their own guitars, their own bass, synths, vocals, keys, etc. So it still has the potential to be good original music. The artists were all just indie artists who couldn't afford to track live drums. Does that mean that the artist should just give up making music because they can't track live drums or hire a drummer? I don't know. In my opinion, no. I think whatever way, whatever means you have in front of you to make music, use it. Use the tools. But again, at the end of the day, they're just tools. How you use them and whether you use them at all is completely up to you. So I would focus less on the tools and focus more on still building creative compositions, regardless of whether you use these tools or not, or what capacity you use them in. The tools are just there to get you from point A to point B in your compositional process. So whether you agree with me or not, I would love to hear your opinions below. Whether you're someone who just thinks all modern music with synthesizers is not making real music, that's totally fine. You can have that opinion. Or if you think that AI is a great helpful tool for music production and for improving workflows, I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. So that has been my TED Talk. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. As always, thank you for the support, and thanks for watching.